Thank you, Judge. Good morning. Caribbean Court of Justice, Appellate Jurisdiction, on appeal from the Court of Appeal of Belize, monitoring hearing in CCJ appeal BZCV number 2 of 2014 between the Maya Leaders Alliance and 23 other villages and the Attorney General of Belize. The members of this morning's panel are Mr. Justice Anderson, presiding judge.
Good morning, Council. Good morning, everyone.
Madam Justice Raj North Lee.
Good morning, everyone.
Madam Justice Ononiwu.
Good morning, everyone.
May we have the appearances, please? Thank you.
Yes, good morning. May it please your honors. Leslie Mendez, appearing for the appellants in this matter.
Morning, your honors. Andrew Marshallek, appearing for the respondent. Without Mrs. Matut Tucker this morning, she had to leave us for an election petition that's being heard this morning, but she sends her apologies.
Yes, thank you very much, both counsel.
Your Honor,
Yes.
may I also say that I also appear with Alistair Jenkins, and I believe Mr. Hughes might be having some difficulties, but he's dealing with them and he should be joining us shortly, Your Honors.
Wonderful. Thank you again very much. And we do see Mr. Jenkins on, and hopefully we'll see Mr. Hughes in due course.
Judge, President.
I want to
Judge.
acknowledge as well the fact that, I'm sorry?
Yes, I wanted to let you know, my apologies, that Professor Solora is also here with us, and
Yes.
I don't know whether you were going to acknowledge her or the
Yes.
person from IACHR. Thank you, Judge.
Yes, I was just
Yes,
about to
sorry.
acknowledge the fact that we are very grateful to have with us this morning the authority herself, Professor Rosa Silorio. Welcome, ma'am, and we expect to hear from you a little later. Are you hearing us okay?
Good morning, Your Honors.
Wonderful, thank you. And we also want to acknowledge the presence of Miss Nancy Bautista, who I think is the observer for the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Miss Bautista, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Okay, Council, so we want to get a sense then as to what progress has been made since last we met in January. I know there was slight distraction on the 12th of March, and that may have caused some disruption, but you will recall that there were 3 specific deliverables that had been discussed in January. The draft of the legislation to go before Cabinet on the 4th of February, with the hope that it would leave the Cabinet subcommittee by the 4th of March. The respondents would then pass the working draft to the draftsperson by the 4th of March, copying the appellants, and then the draft of the legislation from the draftsperson to be passed to the review committee. And this was an estimate, of course, by the 4th of April. And on the review committee, the appellants are represented. So, as I said, we do appreciate that there was the possibility of a disruption caused by the general election on the 12th of March. But perhaps, Mr. Marshall, you could give us just an overview as to how we have fared in relation to these specific items. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. And you're right, it has been a disruption. The National Assembly was dissolved on the 11th February, just days after the draft was presented to the Cabinet Subcommittee. The result is that they have not looked at it and have not reverted. The general elections were held on March 12th, and on March 17th, a new minister responsible for Indigenous Peoples Affairs was appointed. I managed to meet with him on Friday and briefed him as to where we are. He brings a new perspective and new energy to the effort. But he reminded me, and he's right, that having been previously a minister of state, he was not in cabinet when all the briefings surrounding this issue were presented to that body. So we've had to start to bring him, start the process of bringing him up to speed on everything, and we hope to accomplish that this week. The ministry is still without a chief executive officer, but we expect one to be appointed shortly. So our points of contact haven't yet been completely established. The previous chief executive officer has been accommodating our requests to put us in touch with the new minister, but that is transitional. The 3 deliverables remain deliverables is the long and short of that. We will have to try to get those papers before what I expect will possibly be a new cabinet subcommittee as soon as we're able to. And the next step remains the next steps remain the same. But the elections have intervened and
Yes.
have caused delays.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Marshalek, and I think we would all accept that the elections would have caused some disruption. Ms. Mendez, do you have anything to add to what Mr. Marshalek has just said?
Well, simply to say, Your Honor, I do know that we did discuss what my learned senior in the last occasion referred to as the working document on the legislation, not necessarily yet a draft or a bill, but also the policy, Your Honor. I know that we want to get moving with the legislation, but I really need to underscore that for us, the policy and the proposals that have been made to changes to the delimitation does impact the work that is happening continuously in the villages with respect to demarcation. So I'm not sure whether an indication could also be given on the status of the policy itself and at least a tentative position on the methodology with respect to the delimitation.
Yes, we're going to come to the limitation in a little while. It's a substantive issue, but on that point, Mr. Marshalek, can you speak to the availability of the working document? And also, is the question of delimitation to be included in the legislation that you mentioned?
Yes, it is, Your Honor, on both scores. The policy has, as we indicated last time, has largely been approved. It was approved subject to 3 comments. Those were addressed and it was sent for final approval, but they're not substantial changes to the document, which my friend has already. One, I'm trying to recollect, one has to do with environmental laws, making everything subject to that. And the other 2 were not of any grave significance, but they still need to be signed off on before the policy is entirely formalized. But Cabinet had approved it subject to the 3 concerns noted, which were subsequently addressed, and the document returned for final approval. So the document that my friend has is in large measure the final document. As to the approach to delimitation, it's as was before, the automatic recognition of a core space within each village, and the need for applications to be made for spaces outside that, based on the 30 years possession, proof of 30 years
Yes.
possession. The measure for the core space to be recognized remains the 5 acres per person, tying it to population, with a calculation of 5 acres per person. It doesn't mean that everybody in the village gets 5 acres. It means that the village as a whole is entitled to automatic recognition of a space calculated by reference to that rule of thumb.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Marshall. I suspect we're going to have to come back to this because this is a substantive point we are going to have to look at very, very closely. But I wanted to ask Ms. Mendez whether she was satisfied on the issue of the working document. And before she answers, just to recognize, Mr. Hughes, we heard you were having difficulties getting in, and we're glad you're in now with us.
I'd like to offer my profuse apologies to the court, Your Honor. I did have severe difficulties at my end, so I do apologize, sir.
We're glad to see you. Ms. Mendez?
On the working document and the legislation, Your Honor?
Yes, Mr. Marshallek is saying that the document that you have in substance represents the working document that he is using, subject to the three relatively minor caveats that he placed. And the question is whether that suffices for your concern that you have the working document, or do you need something further?
No, Your Honor. I think what would be extremely helpful is for that to be shared with us, because the last one that we have, Your Honor, is one that offers on several, perhaps two points, it offers alternatives. And so the last time that we left our discussion is that we provided to the government our comments on what was presented to us as alternatives. So we can delimit in this way, or we can delimit in that way. I think third parties also had options. And so the last document that we have, whether you want to call it a policy or a working document or the legislation, was not a finalized policy. I'm not too sure from our end. There's no clarity on the final decision that was made with respect to these various issues that were still in contention. So if that could be shared with us so that we have clarity on the final position, then that would be helpful, because we don't have this final document, Your Honor.
Yeah, we understand.
Your Honor, if I may, there's no difficulty in sharing what we have, but it's still not a final document because it still hasn't been finally approved. But it's a little further along than what my friend described, in that it had crystallized on one of the options and fleshed it a little. But it's along the lines that I just outlined. But I can share that for what it's worth. And we have the final version of it still with the Cabinet Subcommittee for final approval.
Okay, so within a week or so, Mr. Marshallek, is that okay? You'll
Yes,
share the
we can
document
do that.
with the appellants, yes.
I can do
Okay.
that today.
Thank you for that, yes. Now, returning to the fact that we were sort of knocked off our stride by the events in early March, and I know it's a little bit unfair perhaps to ask you this, but can you give us any kind of ballpark idea as to how we can get back, when we are likely to get back on track, when you're thinking that the the matter can be placed before the cabinet and then be reviewed by the cabinet subcommittee? What sort of time frame are we looking at here? Bear in mind we're still hoping for that terminal date in October, right?
Yes. No, Your Honor, I would ask for at least another 30 days. Things have settled. As I said, we've made contact with the new minister. His new CEO isn't yet appointed, but we expect that shortly, and we can put this back on track. He's suggesting that we make a presentation to the committee to try to speed it up, because the documents are a little lengthy, and I'm not sure when they'll voluntarily make time for them. So we're trying to find ways to get it confronted as quickly as we can. So I would want to ask another 30 days for us to do that and
Understood.
to get it to the drafts person.
Okay, so the 30 days you're talking about is for the draft document, the draft policy to go before Parliament, and you think in those 30 days as well, it could also be sent to the drafts person? Is that the point?
it would go to the cabinet subcommittee for sign off to say that at least the government side is in acceptance of them, because at this stage they're proposals. They need to consider it and own it as theirs, and
Yes.
then we pass it to the other side.
Okay,
So it
and
goes to the draftsperson, and we share it at the same time we send it to the draftsperson, because it's not in all the technical form and language that legislation requires.
sorry, did
Mr.
I hear you
Marshall?
just say? Yeah, go ahead, please, Judge. No,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Chair. Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Marshall, do I get it right then that the subcommittee could sign off on it on 30 days, so it does not have to go back to cabinet?
That's my hope, that we
Okay,
get it approved by the subcommittee, and then it doesn't really have to go back to the full body.
right. And it goes to the draftsperson on that date. Yes,
Because
thank
there'll
you
be-
for the clarification.
There'll be adequate opportunity for everybody else to have a say on it in due course in any event. So I really don't want to hold it back for that beforehand.
So at what point will the appellants see it? Same date goes to the draftsperson?
Yes, the agreement, the understanding I had was that we would copy it to her when we send it formally to
Yes.
the drafts.
Yes, I think that was the case.
Yes.
And
So
then
that
there
remains.
is that remains the case. And then
That
there
remains.
is a review committee. That's a stage after the draftsperson has completed their work?
Yes. When there's actually a first draft of the legislation to be reviewed, it's to be passed to the
Yes.
review committee. But once we've sent it to the draftsperson, I think we can start appointing the review committee to have it ready for when the draft's finished.
Okay.
So by the 7th of April, more or less, Mr. Marshall, if that's the date you're looking for, just asking, not proposing for it to leave the cabinet subcommittee and go to the drafts person.
No, I was asking for 30 days within which that can be done. We're at
7th of May then.
7th May. Yes.
7th May, yes, that's what I intended. 7th May.
7th May.
And the appellants will see it on that date as well.
Correct.
And then another 30 days for the drafting by the draftsperson.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. I think that
At which
clarifies.
point, thank you, Judge. At which point it goes to the review committee on which
Yes.
the appellants participate.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Mendez, how does that sound to you?
Your Honors, I have just two questions, Your Honor. Is there a draftsperson already identified and contracted for the work? And I was wondering if we perhaps to accelerate the process. I think that the identification of the persons that would constitute the panel, I'm sure we can do it before these 30 days, so that at the time now that it's ready for review, we can then go into a direct review of the legislation, or at least of the first draft of the legislation. So just those, mostly one suggestion and one question, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Marshall?
A person has been identified but not contracted. We need to go through that formal process as well. So I can initiate that now with a view to having that in place within the 30 days to make sure that the draft person
Is ready.
contracted and good to go in 30 days. Because that does take a little time in and of itself.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, on that point, was there any consultation with the appellants on the draftsperson?
There were some recommendations made of a number of persons. A decision was taken to look for somebody regional.
I see.
And a number of persons have been contacted, but some unfortunately weren't able to do it. So we haven't moved forward on that as far as we would like.
Yes. Okay, what about the other point that Ms. Mendez makes, that we could start the process of IDing the people to sit on the review committee early?
We can, but we do have 60 days for that to be completed.
Yes.
So we can.
Okay. Is that something again that you do in collaboration with the appellants or not?
As I understand it, they're to appoint 2 persons, and the government side is to appoint 2.
I see.
So we have 60 days in which to do that.
Okay, so that should not be too difficult to do.
I don't think so.
Yes.
Chair, may I?
Satisfactory? Oh, yes, please, Judge.
Yes, so Mr. Marshall, like anyone else to sit on that review committee, and how long do we think that review committee will have to do their work of review?
Well, I didn't want to preempt the work of the committee or to draw lines around them too much. I think they'll have to do that for us. So it's a matter of putting a draft in their hands and pushing them off, and then they can indicate to us what they need to get it done.
Anyone else to sit on that committee, just for these 4 persons, 2 from the government, 2 from the appellates?
Yes, this was an alternative to actually having a panel draft the thing. We thought it would move quicker this way.
Is there always a danger of deadlock when you have an even number of persons?
Yes, there probably is. There probably is.
So maybe the 4 could agree on a 5th, maybe?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can have a go at it. But at the end of the day, if the different parties want to submit different reports to cabinet for approval, then they can do so.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be good if we can.
Yes.
Sorry, Yana.
It would be good if there was a single report. I think that would,
yes,
if it is possible, that would help to expedite the process, which is what we would like. Have your questions been answered to your satisfaction, Ms. Mendez?
Your Honor, as I understand it, the panel is not necessarily making a decision. So in terms of deadlock, I'm not so sure that the issue really arises.
Okay.
Which is why I was suggesting that perhaps we can get started on establishing the panel, because I think that the panel's mandate will also take some thoughtful consideration from both sides in trying to reach a consensus on what exactly the panel is expected to do, and what the representatives on the panel, the positions that the representative on the panels can take. So for instance, if there's a difference of it, I don't think that they necessarily should, I don't think that they have to reach to some agreement, but rather that disagreement needs to be reflected in whatever report, and the position of each side, perhaps when there is disagreement, explained for the consideration, for the further consideration of cabinet and the subcommittee. So that's why I know we have 60 days, but communication with the greatest of respect, communication between the sides, both sides has not been fluid at all. I think we are nearing 1 year where there has been no meaningful communication between both sides. So I don't think that it's as simple as simply identifying persons and then creating this panel. I think we have to tell them what they need to do, what they can do.
Yes. Well, assuming that we're sticking with the same numbers, when would you be in a position to indicate the 2 persons from your side? Or does that not answer your concern in a week's time? Because your concern is not just the individuals, but the terms of reference that they will have.
Precisely.
That is decided by the 4 persons involved, or is that decided by the parties more generally? Or by the parties through the 4 persons? I think that should be
discussed by the parties more generally, indeed, Your Honor. Not.
Yes.
Sorry, Your Honor, I didn't catch that last part.
No, I was just listening to you. Yes.
Could you say it again, Ms. Mendez? I didn't catch it. Sorry.
My assumption is, Your Honor, that the terms of reference would need to be discussed and negotiated between the parties as to how these 4 individuals are here to assist the subcommittee and the cabinet in their review. So from what lens are they to review, and where there is difference, what is to happen? So they do need some guidance as to what it is that we want them to do and how they can be most helpful. I'm sure that there would be other issues that we could leave to their own consideration and for them to work out. But again, this is where it kind of does become at least a moderately involved process, right? That cannot be done within a week's time, because the issue is not to just set up the panel or choose who is in the panel.
Got you. All right. So you're saying within a week or so, you could send the nominees from the appellants?
Our names, yes.
Okay. Mr. Marshall, you might need a little bit more time, I take it?
Yes, Your Honor. I would want to take it one step at a time. If I can convene the subcommittee to review the drafts, then we can also probably get nominees at the same time.
Okay. So that would be within the 30 days.
Yes.
30 days. Okay. Once you're able to ID your 2 nominees, Ms. Mendez is proposing dialogue so as to be clear on the remit of the review committee. Would you have a difficulty with that?
Your Honor, I know where it's going to end. I would prefer to leave it to the committee to come up with their own terms of reference, and rather than us trying to tie their hands in any way. And I know what Ms. Mendez said, that the 2 sides are going to try to agree. Well, I want to suggest that the members on each side may also have differences. So they will each have to decide how best to contribute and what it is they want to see happen. Hopefully they can discuss among themselves and find some common ground with the draft that's proposed. But if not, each of the 4 it's open to them to generate their own report.
Very well. So what I sense as a consensus then is that within the time stipulated by Ms. Mendez, a week or so, she will send her 2 nominees in. The appellants will indicate who they are. And within 30 days or so, Mr. Marshall will indicate who the 2 are for the respondents. The 4 persons will meet as early as possible to begin to discuss amongst themselves and with their principals what exactly the task is that they will be undertaking in relation to the draft legislation. Do I have that right?
Yes, Your Honor, that's how we envisaged it happening. I don't want to get into back and forthing over terms of reference and trying to dictate to these 4 persons what it is we think they should do. We can describe it for them and let them do what they think, see how they can accomplish it as best they can.
But it takes 2 to tango, and unless both sides agree, then we're not going to be able to have the route that Ms. Mendez had proposed. But my compromise is that the 4 would be reporting to their principals, i.e. to the parties, and the terms of reference would then hopefully be agreed through that process. I think that's the best we can do at this point, Ms. Mendez. I hope that's acceptable.
Yes, Your Honor, I understand.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, did I interrupt somebody? Judge, were you saying something?
Yes, thank you so much, President. Mr. Marshall, did you have in mind a timeline for the review committee to report? And thereafter, or is that looking much too far in the future?
I think it's getting a little ahead of ourselves. We need to get everybody's reactions to what's on the document. I was leaving it open to them as soon as possible, but I know we want to move things along, but I still think that we should give them some space, because that's where hopefully things will be fully considered and the consultations will really take place in the kind of detail that's required.
Okay, thank you. I think unless there are any other comments or questions, we could move on. Obviously, based on what we have discussed so far, we will have to have an adjustment to the revised roadmap. And we are going to, how did we do this in the past? Was it the government that proposed the revised roadmap?
Yes, Your Honor, I could put forth a draft.
Yes.
To deal with it.
And share that with the appellants for their comments. The next item on our agenda has to do with the FPIC process. And in the report from the respondents, we realized that there were quite a few activities which had been taking place and which had been apparently guided by the FPIC. And I don't know, Mr. Marshallek, whether you wanted to just say a few words about that process and those activities, and then we will hear from the respondents if they have a reaction to what has been happening.
Your Honor, there are the two disputes, and I'm afraid there's been little progress on our end from dealing with both of them, although I see that the Department of Forestry has been active in relation to the log clearing issue.
Sorry, Mr. Marshall, is that dealing with the land disputes, including
yes, there were
Laguna,
two
Golden Streams? Yes,
yes,
but
I thought in Golden Stream.
Sorry to interrupt, but I thought that part of your report, quite apart from the land disputes, had to do with the use of the FPIC in authorizing certain activities, which I suspect had the blessing of the government. I just wanted to make sure that both sides are basically happy with the process that entails using the protocol.
Your Honor, I don't think very much happened during the period.
Okay.
The list are the matters that have always been there and have been there for a while. That's why we just barely listed them rather than providing a real narrative, because there's not much to report.
Okay.
There's U.S. Capital Energy, the Living Communities Program, and deepening access via rural electrification. 3 projects in respect of which the protocol is engaged. But I don't know that anything in fact happened during the period on the review. And I do know that a number of disputes have been brewing. I don't see that they've been formalized and reaching here. There is the Golden Stream land clearing, and I see the photographs. There is the Laguna Village land dispute. And then we've also are aware that there's 3 others in early stages, one in San Antonio, one in Piquisaco, and the last is a Big Falls request. They've been looking for a way out of this, out of communal land ownership. Those are the 5. I don't know that anything much happened from the government side because of the state of play of things. On any of them, I see that some land clearing has gone ahead. I see the photographs, and I'm certainly be making inquiries to see how that can be dealt with. I also noticed that in Laguna with the logging, that the ministry has intervened and made certain representations. Again, we need to get a handle on all of that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. No, I think I might have been looking at an earlier document. I apologize. So we're into the land disputes area, and I think Mr. Marshallek has outlined the situation. Ms. Mendez, I'm sure you have some things to say here.
Yes, Your Honor. Is the first question of the court a reaction to FPIC in general? Or is it about these specific complaints that have been highlighted by us right now?
Yes, I think it's about the specific complaints. I was reading a previous document which suggested that there were activities involving the FPIC, but that does not seem to be the case. So we don't need to discuss that.
Oh,
I think we should discuss the land disputes. Yes. And if not to interrupt you, but I know that based on your report, you had referred the Golden Stream incident to the authority. So
yes, Your Honor.
Perhaps it might be a good idea for us to hear from the professor in relation to that incident, and then you could take us through the others that you are experiencing. Professor?
Yes,
Celorio?
Your Honor. So long as just to indicate that after the professor presents, we would like an opportunity to also just add or comment on that, Your Honor. If
yes, of course.
Court grant me.
Yes.
Thank you, Justice Anderson, and thank you, Your Honors, for the opportunity to brief this court. I wanted to confirm that I have indeed received a complaint related to the matter of Golden Stream Village. I received it on February 27th of this year, and I actually forwarded it to the government with a request for information or documentation that's relevant. The government had until last Friday, April 4th, to answer that request. I have a feeling that based on what Mr. Marshall has been describing and the election, that there will be a bit of a delay in receiving that information, but I do think it's very important to receive a response from the government in this matter. And I just wanted to say that in terms of the facts of the complaint, they are very focused on encroaching activity, which began on December 29th of 2024 by third parties without their prior consent of the village. And there's a number of allegations. I mean, there's land clearing, there's registering interest in land, trespassing on land, but also destruction of property. And the complaint addresses 7,000 acres in the village of Golden Stream. And this is all on the part of third parties. As background, Your Honors, this is the second complaint that I have received related to the Golden Stream Village. The first one, I issued a report on June 18, 2020, and it was a similar complaint in the sense that it was dealing with a license permit that was actually granted to conduct salvage logging in the Golden Stream River without consultation and consent. And when I actually visited the villages in 2020, this was actually one of the villages that I had the opportunity to visit as well. In terms of what would be great to hear from the government or know from the government when they share their response or information or relevant documents. One is whether there has been any sort of investigation on the title or licenses that are at issue in this complaint, basically like the circumstances around these activities, and also whether they communicated the existence of Maya land rights, right, before granting this title or licenses, right? And one concern that I have looking at the complaint is that it shouldn't be up to third parties, whether they decide whether the CCJ consent order applies to them or not. I mean, this is something that we would want the government to inform third parties before granting any sort of title or licenses. And of course, the issue of consultation and consent is an issue here, but also from the government, it would be great to hear, if the FPIC protocol is being used, in this kind of matter, and how so, especially in matters related to lands, that have the use and enjoyment by Maya villages, So that would be the update for now. I haven't received any other complaints besides this one, but I did want to say that just because there is discussion about the Laguna Village right now as well, that in my capacity, I've already issued 2 reports on Laguna Village, plus a letter of expression of concern. So it is, of course, of deep concern that there continues to be issues related to compliance with the CCJ consent order when it comes to the Laguna Village. But thank you so much, Your Honors, again. And of course, I'm open to any questions you may have.
So just to clarify, you are now awaiting the response of the government to the questions that you have asked of them, am I right?
Yes. And usually I have to say, and this is something I want to communicate because both parties are here, it's always better if we have some sort of documentation from the government, some sort of background information from the government before I issue any sort of statement or report. So I really encourage the government, as they have done in the past, right, to provide this information and documentation as soon as they can. Maybe a 30-day period would be appropriate for this purpose. But I ask the government in this regard. I do understand this is a very time-sensitive matter, though. So as soon as the government can provide information and documentation, I do think this would be very useful in this situation and to address any sort of potential violations of the CCJ consent order.
What happens in the interim? What's happening? What happens now, for example, whilst you await the response from the government?
I mean, right now, in my particular case, I could issue a letter expressing concern, right? I mean, that is a possibility. It depends on how urgent the situation is. My sense is that we're hearing that this is a very urgent situation, right? So I would encourage the government, to answer as soon as they can. But if I don't hear from them in the next 2 weeks, I do think it's most likely a good situation to issue a letter expressing concern.
Thank you. Just on this point, Mr. Marshallek, do you have a response in terms of when it is that the government is likely to be able to respond to the questions?
What has happened here, quite frankly, is that the personnel responsible for dealing with that will likely change. So it's a matter of handing over the responsibilities and the new people getting on board very quickly. I know the director will probably remain, and but the CEO that's actually in charge of making sure the things get done is not yet in his seat. But that notwithstanding, I'll certainly look into it to see where it is. From what I've seen from the documentation, while the dispute might concern 7,000 acres, there has been clearing on 100 acres.
I see. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Chair, may I go back to
yes,
the
please.
FPIC and just ask Mr. Marshallek one question? Mr. Marshallek, would the matter of the FPIC also be included in the legislation?
Yes, it is dealt with. The FPIC, as I understand it, was always intended to be an interim matter until the legislation makes more specific provisions on how to deal with these issues. And there are provisions proposed in there for dealing with this and making it very clear what third-party land ownership rights are to be extinguished, because some are, and which ones remain intact, because some remain as well.
On that note, Mr. Marshallek, I believe somewhere I saw this matter of training on the FPIC raised and on the rights of the appellants. Is that training ongoing, Mr. Marshallek?
Not within the last 30 days, John. I doubt it very much. But yes, it hasn't been taken off the table. I see they have it. It's still listed on one of the things as to whether there were sessions during that period. I very much doubt it. But all of this needs to continue. It is a challenge, because even for training within the government, as people change and move out of positions, you have to make sure that the new people are familiar with how to deal with these things.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Mr. Marshall. That seems to me to be a key issue. Yeah. The training should continue. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I'm sure we understand and sympathize with your situation, Mr. Marshallek, but as the authority indicates, there is some degree of urgency involved in the Golden Stream matter. I think she mentioned 30 days, and hopefully the government will be able to respond within that time. That would be very helpful. Thank you, sir. And thank you, Professor. I don't know if there are any other comments or questions for you. But thank you again for your work in this area. Yes?
Yes, Your Honor.
Sorry?
Might I add a few comment
Yes, of
on
course.
this?
Yes, absolutely.
Your Honor, I must say that from our end, it's extremely concerning that on the ground, the situation, especially in Golden Stream, is not being treated with any degree of certainty, of urgency, sorry. It is a matter that we raised since early January. And as we speak, Your Honor, clearing does continue. We are now nearing the 10th year of the consent order, and it is baffling. Why is it that we still we are not quite clear on what the implications of paragraph 4 is? Paragraph 4, Your Honor, was the interim measure for now, where lands are being used and claimed by the Maya communities. There should be an epic process. And in this case, Your Honor, there has not only not been an epic process, but there has been absolutely no intervention on the ground to either investigate or to engage with us to seek more information or how we can deal with this matter currently in the interim, while the investigation of the authority and the relevant authorities is completed. The issue with the IPA being in transition, with the greatest of respect, has nothing to do with whether or not we can respond to the situation, because the relevant authorities are the Lands Department and the Police Department, Your Honor. The IPA does not have any enforcement mandate. What their role is to liaise, and we have provided continuing information to the authorities on what the situation is on the ground. If I might be permitted, Your Honor, in Friday, we managed to get an aerial view of the extent of the clearing. And we would like to project this currently, Your Honor, just to emphasize what really is happening on the ground. And 30 days is completely unacceptable for us to be able to do something. There is irreparable harm happening currently to the resources on the land, resources that the villages depend on. And I think currently in the implementation or in the enforcement of these orders, I think that there is something being lost in what is specifically the ultimate objective of this consent order, of these decisions, which is the protection of the resources and the lands, Your Honor. And so at this stage, there is absolutely unequivocal information, evidence before the court, and not before the court, but before the authorities, to show that there is a need to act promptly. If I might share that aerial view, Your Honor.
I don't think there's any objection. Certainly, I don't have a problem with that. Please, go ahead.
This is the extent of what is happening right now, Your Honor, and the work continues. This is very concerning, not only with respect. I'm wondering if there's some. No, this is concerning not only with respect to the loss of resources, Your Honor, but there are serious security implications when it comes to these land clearings in the south. As my learned senior had mentioned at the last occasion, that we are seeing an opening and an increase in land clearings for the purposes of plane landings. So, Your Honor, the urgency in this matter is clear, and we really would like to implore on the relevant authorities to act and not wait until the investigation of the authority. Since it's not the investigation of the authority that establishes the obligation is established through the consent order. I will stop sharing now, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you.
So that's our response with respect to the Golden Stream, Your Honor. I do want to take the opportunity as well that I appreciate, well, I don't appreciate, I understand, or I made to come to the conclusion that there's some hesitancy of collaborating with the appellants, or at least coming into communication. But Your Honor, you see, I think that as much as matters might become messy in our discussions every now and again, we cannot but avoid collaborate with each other and be in communication with each other. The implementation of FPIC, Your Honor, we have been on the ground as well as various government authorities, and there are lots of lessons that are rising from that experience, which we would like to engage the government to improve the protocol that we have. So I would also like to end with an invitation for us to put aside perhaps what are more personal emotions, or maybe not personal, just emotions in having these discussions and entering into discussions with the applicants, because there's much to be learned from both sides. Thank you, Your Honor.
Did you want to mention the other incursions that you have reported, or not?
No, Your Honor. Well, we are working on the ground, and as we mentioned, there is some representations from the Forest Department, which we are acting in good faith and placing some trust that those will be followed through, and we continue to follow up on those incursions. We are seeing a rise in illegal logging in the communities, Your Honor, and we are doing our best to address this. For us to address it effectively, however, we need to have the relevant authorities really appreciate the implications of not acting and the legal obligations that they have, in fact, to act to protect the resources and the lands of the communities. And that really is a collaborative effort. And that's also an effort that is also an exercise, Your Honor, that requires collaboration, as well as all authorities in the highest rank to really reflect that they take their legal obligations seriously, and that the consent order is a legal order that has legal obligations, and that there is actually an interest in abiding by the rule of law. So we continue to work with the relevant authorities with respect to the Laguna matter, to the San Antonio matter, Your Honor, and we hope that we can get to some resolution. If not, of course, there's the authority, and we will then elevate those complaints to the authority.
Yes, but I gather you're saying that even when they're so elevated, there is an issue of urgency that still attends some of these matters. And the authority, of course, has to be deliberate, has to hear from both sides, and that takes a little while. And in the interim, and this is what I was trying to get at with the authority, there is the possibility of harm being done. So, Mr. Marshall, I'm afraid we have to come back to you again, particularly as regards the Golden Stream incident. Apart from responding to the authority, the question is there a point of contact in the government that can have a look right now at what is going on in Golden Stream with a view to ensuring that the consent order is being observed? Yes.
Yes. What happened at Golden Stream is that, as far as I'm aware, nobody has applied for any permits to do any of that. It's not that the government has given permits for that to be done.
But that makes it easier then, doesn't it, Mr. Marshall?
Yes, it means then that potentially
law enforcement.
Yes, it's law enforcement. And it's a matter of making a complaint to law enforcement, and for us to get the Department of Environment involved to see what, if any, laws have been violated there. So I will make that report again and see if we can get something done there. As to the trees that have been cut, as you can see, they have been cut.
Yes, yes. And Ms. Mendez, you had approached law enforcement on this?
Yes, Your Honor. We did copy the superintendent here, and in fact, it's a curious situation, but it's also a very common situation. The response that we saw from the police department was in fact only responding to the complaints of the purported landowner, Your Honor, saying that the village members and that the leaders specifically are harassing him and his workers. And that's the only intervention from that. It was only from that perspective that we saw the intervention from the police department. When, as reported in our compliance report, Your Honor, we also share with the court the situation where there was an indication to the leaders, very clear indication saying we will proceed to clear 100 acres, and we as a matter of urgency, we contacted again the police department as well as the director of the IPA, asking them for some urgent intervention and to go on the ground and to advise them of the implications of what they're doing. And to my knowledge, nothing has been done. Absolutely nothing has been done. Save and except that the leaders were asked to come into the police department because there is a report against them.
Yes. Well, obviously, the point you're making, and I think you made it earlier, is that there needs to be instructions given to law enforcement. And that is where the problem is, I suspect, Mr. Marshall, that the law enforcement are either unaware of the consent order, or they're not abiding by it if the allegations being made are accurate. So the question is, where do the instructions come from? Do they come from the Ministry of Indigenous Affairs? Do they come from the Attorney General's department? Where do the instructions come from to the law enforcement agency in that area?
I don't know that there have been instructions to law enforcement, but let me indicate what I think the problem might be. In terms of permitting for land clearing, there's a minimum amount that you are able to do. And it's beyond a certain acreage that you actually need a permit to do. I think they may be in the bottom of it. So it's something that a landowner could probably undertake without an environmental impact assessment. But I don't know that this is the case. I'm saying that there might be some uncertainty surrounding it. I will seek to get to the bottom of exactly what the issue is. As I indicated, that given that all the points of contacts became disconnected with the elections and the movement of personnel, they have to be reestablished, and we need to find out exactly what the issue is here. From the other perspective, and I know that what the perspective of the Maya leaders are. From the other perspective, you have a landowner with a validly issued title from years ago, and he is undertaking activities on that land, which he says is lawful, and it is the claim of communal land ownership over that space that presents what would otherwise have been a straightforward issue. So I don't think anybody knows quite how to properly deal with it. And this is why the Office on Indigenous Peoples Affairs will have to get involved, because they're not sensitized to all of that. It's an issue that will come up from time to time as we get this sorted out with legislation put on the ground. I appreciate why they say it's urgent, and we'll seek to get to the bottom of it. I'll try to do that later today, but it's not like we're personally going out there. We need to rely on people responding, and we'll certainly give it a good faith effort.
Okay. So obviously this is linked to the last topic we want to talk about, the delimitation methodologies. And it seems to me that that is an important issue we have to sort of spend some time with. But just to conclude on this point then, so two tracks. One is the response to the authority within 30 days, hopefully. We understand the issues you have institutionally. And then secondly, on a more immediate basis, to see what can be done to ensure that if there is being a violation, it's addressed, even before the authority issues a report. And I think you have undertaken to try to, as you said, get to the bottom of it as quickly as you can. Ms. Mendez, I know this does not satisfy you entirely, but this is where we are at, and we will see what progress is made based on the undertakings given.
I appreciate that, Your Honor, but just to make clear, there was a report made to the relevant authorities, to law enforcement. There's factually a report that was made. And to end on this issue of what law enforcement approach should be is a recurring issue that we have highlighted. What happens every time that we make these type of reports to law enforcement is that they say they are not here to mediate or to deal with communal land. And so there's always a hesitancy from law enforcement to get involved. They await the instructions of the Attorney General's office, Your Honor. And in this case, in the material that's already before the court, the response from the Attorney General's office was quite dismissive of the complaint. So I think that we have to also be clear on really factually the life of this complaint and what has really happened in this complaint, Your Honor. But I will just end there, and I definitely do look forward to what the response will be in the short order of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mendez. As I said, I think this overlaps with the last substantive issue that we have to talk about, which is the delimitation issue. And because I gather from what Mr. Marshall said that at least from one point of view, there might be an issue as to the ownership of this particular area. I don't know quite what the answer to the question is, but there is a question about the ownership there. Ms. Mendez, in your report, you had given us some really interesting information about the progress which has been made with auto delimitation. And maybe you could just sort of bring us up to speed quickly on that point. Also on the comparison of what that process produces, the auto delimitation, when overlaid against what you understand to be the methodology being proposed by the government. And I'd love to get Mr. Marshall's response to what you say after you've said it. So would you want to go first, please?
Yes, Your Honor, certainly. Very, very succinctly, I guess. And what we do have, Your Honor, too, if with your permission and if we could crave your indulgence, we do have a 4-minute video just to illustrate to the court the work that is happening with respect to mapping use. Your Honor, we are following very closely the delimitation, the DPM, what we constantly refer to as the DPM. That sets out the most comprehensive and clearest process that the communities can engage in with respect to determining their boundaries. This is a process that starts off with consent, Your Honor, and 33 communities have now given consent to that process. We have never shied away, Your Honor, that there might be 1 or 2 communities that at the end might not choose to delimit their boundaries and might not choose to be governed under Maya customary land tenure. But from what we see here, certainly the majority is accepting Maya customary land tenure, and we have started off now with 33 communities. We also see, Your Honor, that each village is at a different stage with respect to their advances of the boundaries, but they are in constant efforts to negotiate these boundaries with their neighbors, because use and occupation, Your Honor, between and among the communities has always been a sort of fluid process, while the communities themselves certainly have very much designated areas for the different uses. So in the first map that you see, Your Honor, the first map that we set out, we illustrate the advances that have been made by the communities with respect to the identification of the boundaries as among them.
Counsel, not to interrupt you, but could
yes,
I ask, what annex is that you're referring to?
Oh, apologies, Your Honor. That's Annex 1.
Okay. We have a very, well, are you able to display it for us?
Yes, Your Honor. If I could just crave your indulgence for 15 seconds.
Yes. Now, these were included in your compliance report.
Yes.
I take it. Yes. The video that you mentioned earlier was not. Has Mr. Marshall seen it? The video?
No, Your Honor. The video has not been shared
in the report. Yes. So we have no difficulty with the annexes, but the video, Mr. Marshall, do you have any issues with the video? No? Yes?
Your Honor, I don't know what it is, but I don't have any difficulty with them explaining what they've been doing so far with delimitation. I
Yes.
wouldn't object to it. If
Thank
they
you.
want to show the video, we can
Thank
watch
you
it
very
again.
much. Thank you. You will have your turn, of course, afterwards. Yes,
Yeah.
please go ahead, Ms. Mendez.
Yes, Your Honor. So, I was supposed to display this, no? I can't seem to be able to display it right now, Your Honor.
We were particularly interested in Annex 4 and
Mm-hmm.
5. Are those particularly important to you? Because if they are, we could display them at this end if you wish.
Yes, yeah. Okay, I have it here, Your Honor. 4 and 5.
Okay.
Sure. Okay. We have it now. So I'll start off with 4. Here. Mm-hmm. Is it known? Is it this one?
Chair, can we provide some support? Because I do believe
Yes, yeah.
our judicial council may be able to.
Yes, I'd offer that support, but Ms. Mendez had spurned it, and she said that she could produce it.
Yes.
Yes. What do you wish us to do, Ms. Mendez?
Is this?
Oh, it's coming.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Are you seeing the outer delimitation map, Your Honor?
Yes, we are seeing the auto delimitation map. Yes. Can you tell us what we're looking at?
Yes, so this map, Your Honor, is the map showing the progress with respect to delimitation. So here you see in black, you see the boundaries that have already been harmonized between the communities. So these boundaries, Your Honors, these boundaries are not disputed. These boundaries have been agreed upon by by neighboring communities. Here in red, what you see, Your Honors, are boundaries that have already been identified through the various sketch map exercise of the different communities, but there are ongoing discussions with respect to getting to a final harmonization of it, Your Honor. The ones that have no red or black, Your Honor, are just the sketch maps that each community has developed, but they have not yet engaged in negotiations or harmonization of their boundaries. But in general, Your Honor, here you start to see the status of the delimitation exercise currently and where Maya lands are located. The next map, Your Honor.
Yes.
Please, Chair, you go ahead, please.
Before you go on, Ms. Mendez, can you tell us what's the difference between the deep green and the lighter green colors?
The deep green.
Yes, is the light green then all the areas of Mayan interest, Mayan villages?
Deep green. Yes, so the deep green is the base map, Your Honor, and the light green shows the sketches, the boundaries that have been identified by the villages through their own sketch map exercise. So the deep green, all of this here, is the Toledo district.
Right.
That's the base map, yeah. That's provided by the government, Your Honor. That just shows the map. Might I move on to the other one, Your Honor?
Before you do, so the deep green then and the light green, all of these areas are Mayan lands. Is that the proposal, or are there third parties? Are there areas which are not Mayan land here?
Oh yes, there might be third parties, Your Honor, but this map does not show yet the third parties that we overlaid. This just shows where Maya lands are and whether it is national land or let's just call it non-Maya land.
Okay.
That still forms part of the Toledo district. But this is not illustrating in any way the third parties, Your Honor.
And the deep green, is that the area of the non-Mayan land? I'm just trying to get that clear.
Right. Well, this is not, yes. At least with respect to the delimitation so far.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, Chair, could I just ask before you move on, please, Ms. Mendez, if you go back to the top, is that one of the most northerly pieces, Golden Stream? I'm trying to,
Here is
what,
Golden.
yeah, what has been done according to this map with respect to Golden Stream and the boundaries?
They have developed their sketch map, Your Honor. So they have given consent to auto delimit their lands, and they would have now developed their sketch map showing their boundaries as they know it. Some of these boundaries, Your Honor, are really not contested. They are historical boundaries that the communities have always used. Some areas are contested. As you see here, they would now be in a negotiation process or a discussion with Indian Creek so that this area here can be harmonized. But this map here is the first step where they have developed their own sketch map. And in fact, some of these maps, Your Honor, reflect like I mentioned, just reflect historical boundaries that have been with the communities.
Yes, and what I understood you to say is that, for example, within Golden Stream, there may be third parties who claim rights.
Indeed,
Yes.
Your Honor, and that is in the other map that we shared.
Okay.
The one with the
Yes.
green line. Sorry, the one with the yellow lines.
Thank you very
Yes.
much. Yes.
Annex 5, that's the next one. Yes, okay.
Ms. Mendez, before we move on, could you just confirm what harmonized boundaries mean? So you explained that there are some boundaries that are denoted through black lines, and based on the legend, those are harmonized boundaries. So are harmonized boundaries those which have been the subject of consent?
Yes, the harmonized boundaries, Your Honor, are boundaries that have reached their final conclusion with respect to what the community's responsibilities are under the process to delimit. So these are boundaries that have been first identified by the neighboring communities through their sketch map. They then engage in a discussion with each other through their community guides, through their elders. They would engage in a discussion for them to come to an agreement and a consensus that, yes, this is where our boundaries are. And so there's no dispute now with respect to those harmonized boundaries, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Mendez.
Is there, I recall there was supposed to have been a validation exercise. Is that part of the process
Right.
you just described?
No, that's not yet part of the process, Your Honor. And that really arises out of the state of uncertainty that I believe the government has always been in, at least since 2020, with respect to the applicability of the DPM. So we have not gotten any verification from the government. Nonetheless, just to remind ourselves, funds were collected. The communities are very eager. As I mentioned, some of these boundaries are historical boundaries, and there are standards with respect to how this should be done, Your Honor. So considering that the DPM was agreed upon by both parties, by the then government, the communities have been engaging in this process.
And you say 33 villages have been delimited by this process so far? 33
villages have given consent, and 33 villages have developed their sketch map.
Okay. How many more villages are there?
7 more villages, Your Honor.
Only 7, that's it. Okay, we could move on to Annex 5 when you're ready, please.
Yes, Your Honor. There. So this, I hope your honors are able to see it.
This
Are we
is still
seeing the
Annex
map, Your
4.
Honors? Yes, this is Annex 4. So this is the map that overlays what we understand the government's process to be.
Yes.
Against the methodology that the communities have utilized.
Yes.
So this shows, Your Honor, the method of the circular scheme that defines the automatic area by population.
Yeah.
After, of course, we know that there is a mechanism through which the communities can then go ahead and apply for more based on what we consider to be quite a restrictive criteria. But at least in terms of the certainty that we are seeing here, Your Honor, we see that it is these circles that are overlaid. Your Honor, in our view, what this shows is not only the obvious very restrictive space that the communities have, but just the dissonance between what is being proposed and the consideration of the government as to how we delimited these lands against the actual use and occupancy of these lands for the communities. So for instance, Your Honor, we see here that some of this, if we use the methodology, it goes into Guatemala, right? And so, Your Honor, the point of this map is just to illustrate the stark difference between the approaches. And why is it that we say that first, the methodology that is being proposed as an automatic recognition, and the idea that that's a very attractive proposal. Here we see, Your Honor, that in terms of the realities of the community is not as attractive, because these circles, Your Honor, were again never really threatened, but also it's not what sustains and protects the life of the community as a whole. Any questions with respect to this approach, Your Honor? Of course, I project this with the caveat that this is just as we understand the methodology to be and based on the most recent policy that was shared with us.
Yes, well, thank you for that. So the mathematical formula of multiplying the acreage by the population is what gives you the circle that you represent on the map.
Yes.
Am I right? Okay.
Yes,
What's
Your
the difference between the blue circle and the pink? Is there any difference?
The pink is the pink in the middle, Your Honor?
No.
That's...
There are, well, yeah, but there's also a sort of brownish color with the pink in the middle, which is different from the blue. Is there any difference that's intended to suggest or not?
Your Honor, the bigger circle, so the inner circle here just identifies the center of the village, because that's the methodology. You start to draw the circle, so to speak, from the center of the village. So the very, very pink is the center of the village. Yes. The blue that you see, the sort of blue and purple, is the color that we use to represent the larger villages and therefore the larger circle. Indeed. So the one that's a little lighter represents the 2 kilometers, Your Honor.
Okay. And this is without prejudice, of course, to the government's proposal that the extent of the circle could be widened by reference to the usage, which you say is a very restrictive criterion, yes?
Yes, Your Honor, with respect to the criteria, but that you have to satisfy to then claim that extra land. But not only that, Your Honor, it's just to show that we're not really being guided by the decisions of the lower courts and the inherent nature of what it is that we're doing, which is to look at use and occupancy and trail that use, Your Honor.
Yes, I know we understand you fully. I know you want to move on, but could I just ask you, did you share this with the government, the respondent?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes.
Okay.
This map is there.
Right, and well, we'll hear from Mr. Marshall, like whether, in his view, those circles represent the formula in terms of their size that the government is proposing. That would be interesting, because there's obviously a huge difference it seems to us, between the methodology of auto delimitation and then this other methodology which relies more on a mathematical formula plus the use for 30 years. Okay. Did you want to say anything further, Ms. Mendez, on this?
Yes, Your Honor. I could go to the third-party map, or I could go to the presentation, to the very short video.
Would you mind going to the
which-
third-party map for a moment? Because we also were a little concerned about that, because that tends to show third-party interests in the areas which have been auto-delimited as Mayan.
Right.
Yes.
Right, Your Honor. So let me go ahead.
Yeah, while you're doing that, Ms. Mendez, the last one you showed us then was Annex 4. That's what I have in my.
That was
Yes.
Annex 4.
Thank
Indeed,
you.
Your Honor.
Right. Thank you.
So this is
one
the
will be
final
Annex
map.
5? Mhm.
That's this Annex 5, Your Honor.
Thank
This
you
is
very
the
much.
final map that we shared with the court. Now, again, we make the same caveat, Your Honor. We have developed this map based on the information that we have been able to obtain from the Lands Department. And here you see that in terms of third parties, there's not necessarily a significant number of third parties, though there are some that raises concerns, which are the bigger ones, Your Honor. And so here, what we're able to see that, in fact, there are some third parties that claim entire villages, Your Honor. These entire villages down here are subject to third party interest. However, the ones that you see a bit clustered, Your Honors, on at least our preliminary investigation, we have been able to identify that most of these are leases that have been obtained by village members in these villages. These, Your Honor, are highly unlikely to have to be subject to compensation in the ways in which we believe this compensation would reflect or would mean a strain on the public purse. These individual parcels, Your Honor, were obtained by community members who were, for various different reasons, feeling in a sense of insecurity, and so they applied for leases. But they are not third parties in the same way that we might conceive of third parties that are perhaps outsiders or potential proposed developers, Your Honor. So the point here is to demystify just a little bit this idea that third-party interests would collapse the government. I don't know if Your Honors have any questions with respect to.
Where is Golden Stream, may I ask you, Counsel, in relation to this map here?
Here is Golden Stream,
Oh,
Your
Golden
Honor.
Stream is there, right? Okay. So there is a part of Golden Stream which is claimed
Right here.
by the third party.
Yes, Your Honor. It's the one in between Medina Bank and. Okay.
And
So this is. I don't know
yes.
if I don't even know if Your Honor can see the mouse, but
Yes, no, we
it's
can
in
see
this
it.
area.
Yes.
Okay. So it's in this area, Your Honor.
Okay, and but also, isn't there some claim that is almost at the center of the village?
1 second, Your Honor. Yes, you see some here.
Right.
This is this I believe is Spice Farm, Your Honor. This is a developer that's there.
Right.
You also have here at the center of the village. And like I mentioned, Your Honor, here in Dolores and Machakilha, you have entire communities being taken over by a third party.
Now, where is the clearing taking place in Golden Stream? Can you? Is it too difficult for you to identify?
Let me ask for some help on that point, Your Honor. It's in between these two little boxes. It's in between these two parcels, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yeah. Chair, could I ask as well, with respect to these areas, Ms. Mendez, where there is a lot of yellow, let me put it that way. I'm trying to make sense of, sorry, I'm trying to see which villages are affected the most. Yeah, for example, where's your mouse? If you could put your mouse back to where there is, yes, come to the left. Yes, at least from my screen. What villages are those and how are they impacted by, are these leases you said? I'm trying to understand.
Pedro Colombia. So this is San Pedro, Colombia, Your Honor. Here, these are, and again, Your Honor, it's highly likely and based on our preliminary investigation, these are individual leases that have been granted to members. So you would see that they have been a lot of leases that have been granted here. You also see it here in Big Falls, Your Honor. You also see quite a number of individual leases here in Big Falls.
So these are Mayan people, that's what you're saying?
Sorry, Your Honor?
Are these Mayan people that you're speaking of? You said members. I thought I heard that word.
These are village members, Your Honor.
Village members. Thank you very much.
Are these Mayan people?
Mayan village members.
That's why they want to come and they might not work for them. It depends on the village, Your Honor. But for instance, just as a general approach, just to how to understand it, of course, we can get into the specifics of each community. For instance, Big Falls, which is a village that is undecided as to if it will accept the Maya customary land tenure. This is a little bit more mixed with respect to the types of leases that have been granted. This includes both members and non-village members. And you can say it as non-Maya and Maya, but there are some members of Maya villages, Your Honor, that are also non-Maya because it's based on the ways in which the community organizes its village and who it accepts as a member. In San Pedro, Colombia, Your Honor, you have more of predominantly village members that own these parcels. So it depends, but in general, Your Honor, what we're seeing is that those little ones that are clustered, those are owned, and they're not titled for the most part. They're leases that the village members have been granted at one specific time.
And those leases were granted by whom? Chair, if I may, Ms. Mendes. The leases
That would be by the lands. That would be by the lands.
Government. Yeah.
That would be by the government, Your Honor.
By the government. Yes. Thank you very much. One thing I want to get clear, Ms. Mendes, you mentioned going into something about Guatemala.
Oh, I was just making the claim, Your Honor, but that was on the other other map. That when you draw the circle based on the formula that has been given to us, you just draw if you draw the circle, some of the circle goes into Guatemala, Your Honor.
I follow you. Thank you very much.
I don't think Belize would be claiming any land in Guatemala at all. So I think we can overlook that one. Okay, we're getting on towards an hour and a half. You wanted to show us a short video, Ms. Mendes?
Yes, Your Honor. Let me just stop sharing here.
We don't have audio.
One second. Right. Sorry, Your Honors. Let me start it again.
That project supports the community to show evidence, proof of how they use, enjoy, and occupy their territory.
Most important for me is that I have to show where I go and wash and go collect food there from the cargo. We are Maya. So we use that. So like 5 to 10 years, my children don't know where, but I use the map so they can go and use it again when they are bigger.
So I think that is why it's very important because this map will indicate where we are, where we live, and what kind of work that we've done, that we do within this region, within our community. And a picture that we took and indicated in the code for them to see. So I think that is what it's the same thing what we are doing now, but it will be for us, for the community, as well as the government, I believe. So that is why it is very important. And the data that we do collect, that indicates whereby we do our fishing, hunting, farming, everything. So I think that is very, very important.
We try like we go find like a Japa. Yes, and we go fishing, everything, washing, bathing, and that. Yes, because we want to take care of the river like it needs clean. We have to protect our water. Well, the map of Samosata is very important to the villagers because for the younger generation coming, they will get the knowledge and the information about the village. On the map, we have drawn the map of Samosata, including the inside and the outside thing. Because important how we use the land where we live. For example, like the farming and the rivers we use for washing, like the lady.
It shows where our village border is and all the things that we could find in the village. If we go hunting, when we can find the trail, we could get the map and we could find it on the trail on the map. While the younger generation can know the places where we used to work before and know the history of the village, while the government doesn't know where our land is, how we use it, and the map could help them show the areas where we use for farming and hunting.
I think it plays a crucial role in our community to actually document what are some of the how we use some of the areas like the sacred site. The map shows that it can be used for educational purpose, for to advocate for the right of the Maya people. The most interesting of this cadastre project is that, first of all, cadastre is a great initiative whereby it gives the opportunity to the community to show how they use and occupy their land. As Maya people, they're dependent on the land. Their survival is dependent on the land. Without their land, I don't know, it will be very complicated for them.
That was it, Your Honor. Thank you so much. Is that clear?
Yes. Is that it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, well, thank you. And on behalf of my colleagues, we appreciate seeing that. It gives, of course, a human face to some of the issues we are speaking about. That was very helpful. We found the maps very, very useful too. Very, very helpful in helping us to understand the arguments that you're putting forward. Mr.
Right, Your Honor. Might I add before?
Yes.
Might I just explain a little bit too? This the video showed the methodology that went into Annex 3, Your Honor. So Annex 3
Yes,
is the product of the work that you saw on the video itself.
we
Yes, Your Honor.
understand. Yes, thank you. Mr. Marshall, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm not quite sure how to respond to that. But what I can do is to explain the policy as it exists from the government, because the circle idea was abandoned. So the core recognition area is not a circle anymore. But if you were to go to their Annex 3, I think they showed some data for Pueblo Viejo village. And that might be helpful. I can use that as an illustration.
Yeah, could somebody put up Annex 3, please?
Yeah.
Is this the one you want, Mr. Marshall? Yeah.
Yes, yes. You will notice that the members of the village are clustered around the center. And then you have outliers, like to the southwest there, there's only one person out on that, in those mountain ranges there. What the current policy does is it automatically recognizes that area where the cluster is. And then the other boundaries need to be drawn organically as and when applications are made for those further spaces. So the difference in the delimitation that we envisage is that the middle of that, where you see most of the people are, is automatically recognized. And then we concentrate on drawing lines where it should be on the outer edges and allow time for those applications to come forward. So the approach is different and will likely produce very different results.
Yes.
Because the additional spaces will require proof of use and possession. But the idea is from the outset to catch most of it. That would catch 85% of that village right there. And then you work on sorting the boundaries for the other 15. Yes.
Mr. Marshall, could you just clarify what you're calling clusters? I'm looking at the map, even on my own screen. I'm seeing lots of circles, which, based on the legend, cross-references areas subject to particular use, as I understand it, different types of use. So you're saying areas outside of the clustering. Are you saying areas where, based on the boundary that we've seen, some of which is harmonized, some of which is ongoing, the areas that don't have circles covering them, is that what you're saying is non-clustered? I just want to make sure I understand what you mean.
The circles, the use clusters right where the name Pueblo Viejo appears. You'll see a lot of pink, white, and some green, and then you see greens going out and few pink spreading out towards the east, the west. And then, for instance, in the southeast, there's only one green all the way out in some hills there. Yes, that one there. And the same is true going up in the northwestern part. But if you're to do the calculation, the 5 acres per population, I'd venture to suggest that most of this is caught, most of this activity and use is caught for Pueblo Viejo. You will have some outliers where the applications for proof need to be made and proof need to be given. And as and when that's done, that boundary is drawn. So that's the approach that the policy takes. It doesn't take this blanket approach that's being adopted. It tries to draw those lines a little more precisely and allow for time for it to be done, for that to be eventually be accomplished as and when necessary applications are made and prosecuted to completion.
And the reason for going that route Was that the failure to complete the auto delimitation because of the lack of resources, or was it something else? Sometimes you mentioned third-party interests. I'm not sure.
Yes, it's both. It's both. It's because this has taken such a very long time to do, and it's really only in response to the government proposing to do it another way that there's been this rush for these black lines to be drawn and presented. When we started here, when I came on board, there was very little of this available. Well, we're not surprised that it looks the way it is. If we go back to, all right, 4, the overall
Annex
map.
4,
I'll
please,
just use
Ms.
that
Dookie.
as an example. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
You will see that. Sorry. Can we get 4 on the screen?
Yes, it will come up. Ms. Dookie,
Yeah.
Annex 4, please.
Yes, you will see that most of the available area is already taken up by the delimitation process that's being undertaken. The area to the north that's green are all forest reserves. The Northwest Columbia Forest Reserve, you come over to Bladen Forest Reserve, and you come right over to Paynes Creek National Park. Those are all national parks. And then when you go in the bottom, the southeast, there's the Temashar Stone National Park. As a part of the policy, the government has taken the position that no national park or reserve is to be included. The interest is not to be recognized in any national park or reserve. So there are issues there. It's also not to be recognized in any public roadway, streets, community centers, schools. All of that's to remain under the control of respective village councils. So there are matters, quite a few matters to be worked out there. And the map, for me, highlights some of the potential issues and conflicts that will arise. It doesn't show me any easy path to that. So all of that will have to be confronted, because when the claims are eventually completed, you will see those in the northeast there haven't really been included yet. I would say there's only really the national parks that are left in the Toledo district.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
just a quick question. I'm looking at Annex 4 that
Yes,
that's on the screen. And I just wanted to quickly ask if there is broad agreement with what is depicted in terms of the dissonance between what results from the automatic recognition through the drawing of the circles and what the villagers have been producing through the auto delimitation process that Ms. Mendez would have outlined.
It's hard to say. I expect so. And there would be considerable differences. What it is some of this, well, all of it will require verification. None of it has been verified. And there will be issues with that. But the way we see it is that you shouldn't let those issues interfere with the automatic recognition of those spaces where there really shouldn't be any issue. When you go into the middle of the village and you spread out from the center and spread outwards, there's some of that you don't need any proof for. I mean, you see it when you go there. So there's no point to engaging in that kind of mechanism for that. Hence the automatic recognition of those areas. It's where you spread out from that the issues will arise. And as to third-party interests, third party is defined by the policy to include those village members who hold private titles, because they have rights under those private titles as it is. So they're treated as third parties too.
Okay, so what you have just described then, if I understand it, is the current policy of the government, and that's the basis on which you intend to go forward. Do I have that right?
That's the basis on which a working draft has been prepared,
Yes.
and on which consultations go forward.
Yes, I mean, I think it's obvious that there is a big difference between the auto delimitation process and this more mathematical formula. We know that auto delimitation is subject to verification, so that's one issue. We know that the circles can be expanded by reference to use and so on. But even you yourself, Mr. Marshall, I think admits that you know, at the end of the day, there would be quite a stark difference between the two methodologies, wouldn't you say?
At the end of the day, it's
Yes.
conceivable, because the existing methodology doesn't preclude coming to the same conclusion that auto delimitation does. You see, auto delimitation requires recognition of all of it from the outset, while what is being proposed is you recognize a core and then you grow out as and when applications are made. But there's nothing to say that when all applications have been submitted and are considered, it can't produce the same result. I think it's unlikely, but conceptually, I can't prejudge any of it. You'd have to look at what the individual circumstances are. But the difference in approach is to start with the nucleus and go outward, while what auto delimitation suggests is that you just recognize all of it in one go.
Yes.
And that presents a host of difficulties that we're trying to, that I think will take a long time to resolve, and is better resolved on an individual basis, on individual considerations of proof in each circumstance.
Mr. Marshall, could I ask then, does the legislation then put in place a mechanism for the resolution of those sorts of applications that will come concerning 30 years use and occupation?
Yes, there's an adjudicative tribunal to be established to deal with it. But the core, the automatic recognition area, provides that the government will do those surveys for those boundaries. They can apply on the strength of a sketch, so they don't need little more than the kind of sketches they've done for the automatic areas. But going out, there will need to be proper surveys to support the applications, and evidence of use and position going out, spreading out from the automatically recognized areas.
And that process will also be, sorry, Chair.
Sorry.
Yeah, that
No,
process.
please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. That process, Mr. About the surveys and so on, that will also be contained in the legislation?
Yes, that's that.
Okay.
I'm going from my recollection.
Yes.
And remember that they're just proposals, because not even the government side has properly considered and adopted them. Which is why I'm reluctant to discuss them, because you know they might not materialize, just like how the concentric circles met with broad opposition and were not followed through. But the concept is the same, which is that there's a core space that we don't really have to quibble over. That is fine. You recognize that, and we work on the rest. But in terms of recognizing all of that on the same basis that the core spaces should be recognized, as auto delimitation suggests, that is not an approach that we think would serve the interests of putting the legislation in place and conferring tangible benefits in as short a time period as possible. The verification of this alone takes you another, I shudder to suggest it, 10 years.
Okay, any further questions, colleagues? Ms. Mendez, you had suggested that there was unclarity surrounding the government's methodology. Are you still unclear?
yes, Your Honor, because as I understand it, it's okay. So is it still the circular scheme based on the overall population, or is it the 5 acres per person? Nonetheless, I will say from now, either of those, what we keep avoiding, and perhaps not us, I will just say what the government keeps avoiding, is that what should be informing this process is use and occupancy, not need of the communities, Your Honor. We assume, of course, that each individual needs land, but it's not need that really informs or is the basis of the rights that have been recognized. It is the rights that have been acquired based on land use and occupancy. So there's a stark difference, and the reason why what we're producing is so different is because we're not starting from that very basis. So I will say that even if it's the 5 acres per person, or if it's the round circle, Your Honor, that we would still, obviously, I don't think anybody's surprised that we would not be in agreement with that methodology. With respect to the outer extent beyond the circle or beyond these 5 acres, Your Honor, our issue with that is really about the 30 years imposition of use and occupancy, Your Honor. In our view, it is an unrealistic and high threshold to put the communities to proof. That's not to say that we are accepting that they haven't been there even longer than that. What the issue is the burden of evidence that is being put on the communities to establish the extent of their boundaries, not to establish their rights, Your Honor. Our position is that no matter how much we have tried to appreciate how this will work, in our view, it's unrealistic to put a burden on the communities to establish 30 years occupancy and use of every inch of their land. And that is invariably where these applications will go. I want to also say, Your Honors, that in addition to us not going back to what the standards or the guidelines that have already been unpacked in the decisions in the lower courts, we're also not being informed by what the international standards say, which is something that we could really benefit from, in the sense of how do we implement these sui generis rights, as opposed to simply being informed by common law principles, which the cases have said are, in the case of indigenous people's rights, quite unhelpful, Your Honor. So that is our position, and that really is at the core of our impasse with respect to the delimitation. We're not really being informed of the rationale that led us here. And in fact, I will dare to say, Your Honor, even before this court, and there have been very public statements that in fact, what is the impetus or the motivating factor here is a deliberate attempt to limit the rights, to delimit the extent of the land that the communities can take. So again, obviously, if we start off from that basis and that understanding, then we will produce extremely different maps, Your Honor. I will end it there, Your Honor, but yes, certainly the 30-year occupancy. And let me just say the 30-year occupancy, Your Honor, will leave, I think, maybe 2 or 3 villages completely out of the Maya customary land tenure. And these are villages that were part of the decision and have been named in the decision, but they were created 25 years ago or 26 years ago now. And so again, just going back, that I think we've lost track of what exactly it is that we are doing with respect to delimitation, Your Honors.
Yes. Well, I think we have your point very, very clearly in mind. And we understand the force of what you say. We have also understood what Mr. Marshlick has said. As we all know, this panel doesn't have any coercive powers. We are simply trying to hold the hands of the parties towards a settlement of the implementation of the agreement. We don't want to get to the point where we have agreed something and then it's in legislative form, and then there's a challenge to it afterwards. We would not like that, but that is one possibility, because I do think you understand, Ms. Mendes, that if we're going to go through the validation exercise, that is going to take some time. I don't know whether it's going to be 10 years. I don't know. Of course, a lot of that would depend on the alacrity with which the government moves or can move. So, you know, it's a little bit like the FPIC. We were in a pickle in a sense with the FPIC, and then we tried it, and it seems to be working to some extent satisfactorily. I think the critical point is not so much the lack of clarity, but as you have said, that you fundamentally disagree with the methodology because it's starting from a different place from which you think it should start. We can only encourage you, both sides, to, you know, try to accommodate the views of the other as best you can. But we would definitely want something tangible to be produced by the timetable that we have set. And if that thing is so unpopular with, in this case, the appellants, then there will be recourse, of course, that you will have. And beyond that, I'm not quite sure what else we can do in this forum. But we understand exactly what you've said. Yes. I understand the other side as well. Mr. Marshall, like you did say to some extent that these proposals have not even been approved by the cabinet or the subcommittee of cabinet. So I know that you understand what Ms. Mendes has said, and hopefully to the extent that there is some flexibility, room for adjustments, that you'll take that into account as best you can in the final policy document that comes forward. That's the best summary I can give, which is not necessarily the one that either side might be looking forward to. All right, so I think we have spent enough time on this. I know our authority had given us a view, and I know that perhaps it's safe to say that she has not retreated from that view, and we acknowledge the position that the professor has taken on this matter of delimitation. We have to then look to the future for another meeting, another monitoring meeting, and we were thinking of 3 months from now, basically, towards the end of July, the 25th of July, to be precise. And we would ask for your compliance reports to come in 2 weeks before that, by the 11th of July. We really don't want to stop this process until we have something in hand. And the sense I get is that it's not going to be what both sides, or maybe either side, wants, but we really want to complete our monitoring function so that if it is necessary, we could move into another phase of dealing with this matter, but we cannot go on indefinitely like this. So we would like something tangible to be produced by October, and we will then see how we move forward from that point. So may I thank you all for attending
Mr.
this
President?
Hearing. Yes, sir?
Please forgive my impertinence. I just wanted to personally, on behalf of my firm, congratulate you on your appointment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hughes.
And please forgive the delay. Should have been done an awfully long time ago.
No. I'm not sure congratulations or commiserations are in order, but I understand the spirit in which you speak, and thank you very much. Okay, Anything else from anybody else? My sisters, are you? No.
Nothing
Okay.
more for me, Chair. Thank you.
Yes.
Your Honors,
Yes.
the same, I'd like to associate myself with the thoughts just expressed by my learned senior, Mr. Hughes, but also just to express our gratitude to the court, and in particular as well to Justice Saunders, who I understand is also leaving us. But he also played a key role every now and again coming in to push this process through, Your Honor. So I just want to express the gratitude of the appellants, of the communities, as well as of myself, Your Honor. Thank you so much.
I will convey that. We will convey that to President Saunders, and I'm sure Council speak for you as well, Mr. Marshallek.
Yes, and I believe we did that last week, and I was before
Indeed.
Your Honor.
Absolutely, you did. But particularly in relation to this,
yes,
this
indeed.
matter, yes. Okay, well, thank you all very much for your patience. We are making progress, I'm sure of it, and I hope to see the fruits of that in the not too distant future. Madam Deputy Registrar, would you please close the proceedings?
Yes, Judge. Judge, do you wish me to congratulate you also?
No, Madam Deputy Registrar, that is fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Justice Anderson. Thank you so much, Madam Justice Rajnatley. Thank you so much, Madam Justice Onaniwu. Thank you, Counsel, Professor Solorio, and our representative from the IACHR. Thank you to the staff of the Caribbean Court of Justice. This court now stands adjourned. Good day to all. Thank you.
I'm glad.
Thank you.